Hi, everybody. I'm just waiting for the numbers to grow closer to the amount of registrants, and then we'll get started. If you're wondering why the long pause. Okay, the numbers have plateaued, so we'll get started, and maybe more will make their way to the event. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the second event of our 2023 Adams Sustainability Celebration. I'm John Robinson, a professor in the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and the School of the Environment, and presidential advisor in the environment, climate change, and sustainability. I'll be moderating this event today, which we're pleased to be holding in collaboration with the UTSC Sustainability Office. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be posted on the CECCS website and YouTube channel. We hope you will join the conversation during the Q&A later on. If you have a question for any of the speakers, please type it into the Q&A chat or raise your virtual Zoom hand and we will unmute you at that time of the event. I want to begin by acknowledging this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. This is especially true, I think, since we have much to learn from Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous knowledge keepers about how best to think about sustainability issues. The Adams Sustainability Celebration is a tribute to the growing community of sustainability-minded students, faculty, and staff at the University of Toronto, hosted by the Committee on the Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainability, CECCS, and made possible by the generous donation from Wendy Adams. The purpose of this event, this series of events, is to celebrate successes, inspire new activities, build relationships, and collaboratively deepen campus engagement around sustainability. I think today's topic is crucial for universities and other higher education institutions to address. How can we best contribute to the transformative changes needed for the world to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals? What can the universities do? What should the universities be doing to contribute to those goals? With that said, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our guest speaker is Andrea Cuesta Claros. So welcome, Andrea, a student at the Monash Sustainable Development Institute at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. Through her research, she focuses on how the SDGs influence the role of universities in creating more just and sustainable futures. I'm very happy to say that I have been an external panel member for Andrea's PhD, so I've had the pleasure of seeing her work unfold. Our two panelists are Irina Creed, Professor and Vice Principal of Research and Innovation at UTSC. Professor Creed is an internationally acclaimed ecosystem scientist who has studied environmental issues across Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. She integrates disciplines in creative ways to advance scientific understanding of global environmental changes, to explore their effect on human health and well-being, and to develop relevant public policy to affect positive social change in the direction of greater social justice and equity. Welcome, Irina. Erica De Ruggiero is an associate professor of social and behavioral health science, the director of the Center for Global Health, and co-chair of the SDGs at U of T initiative, which we'll be hearing about. Her research focuses on evaluating the health, gender, and equity impacts of policies on marginalized groups, such as precarious workers. She explores how different types of evidence shape global policy agendas and influence global governance in the context of the SDGs. So welcome, Erica. Andrea is going to start us off with a description of her work. Then Irina will talk about the SDGs at UTSC. Erica will tell us about the SDGs at U of T initiative. and I will say a few words about the work of the CECCS. These presentations will be followed by a brief discussion among the panelists, and we will then open up for questions from the audience. So with that, over to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much. I will go through this awkward moment of sharing my Zoom. Is everything okay? Can you see my screen, I guess, yes?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great, thank you. Well, thank you for the introduction and welcome to everyone. And thank you also for your interest in this very important topic. Firstly, I would also like to acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation on whose country I am presenting from today, and all of the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all meeting and joining in. And my respects, I would like to also acknowledge or pay my respects to elders past and present. As you may already know, I don't want to give you a whole lecture on SDGs, but I thought it wouldn't hurt if I mentioned briefly some things about the SDGs, kind of basic characteristics of these goals. So as you may already know, the Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals were agreed in 2015, and they set out an ambitious and transformational vision for humanity, and they guide us in tackling the world's most complex and critical challenges. In other words, the SDGs are about the transformations needed in society to have more just and sustainable futures or to achieve them. As you may also already know, the SDGs are applicable to all countries. The goals aim to leave no one behind by asking us to prioritize the most vulnerable in all of our undertakings. And the SDGs are a set of 17 indivisible and complexly interlinked goals, meaning that we need to address the goals in context of one another and not separately. Finally, because the scale and complexity of these challenges, the SDGs are everybody's responsibility. In specific, the goals and the Agenda 2030 call on different sectors of society to work in partnerships to address these issues. And universities are one of these actors or these sectors of society and these types of partners that are needed for the achievement of the goals. Some argue that universities they're more than partners, and the universities have a great potential to become essential actors in the achievement of the SDGs. So looking at the 17 SDGs and thinking about universities' purpose in society and the different parts of different missions of the university, I hope that we can easily see why the SDGs need universities and they're different. They can see why the SDGs need the universities, but also we can see the different ways in which universities can contribute to the SDGs. So looking at these 17 goals. And I will give you some examples or talk about it a little bit. So for example, universities have the potential to greatly impact the SDGs through their education mission. We also know it as the first mission of the universities. And we can impact the SDGs through our students and through our graduates. And in specific, the SDGs or goal 4 partly addresses these need of education to achieve the goals. For example, goal 4.7 talks about the knowledge, skills, and competencies that us as students need to address the challenges of the goals. And even more fundamental, goal 4.3 talks about the importance of access to higher education. It talks about equal access, not universal, not wider access, but which is a pity in my and how I think, but I think it's a start, this acknowledgement of the need for equal access to higher education. But apart from those goals or those specific goals that call for the need of education in higher education and the need for that to achieve the goals, universities also can contribute greatly to the SDGs through the research mission. So research is essential to understanding the challenges included in the SDGs. Research is also needed to explore, to develop, and to exchange creative and progressive ideas to address the goals. And we can also think of universities' third mission and how we can contribute to the goals through this. And the third mission is probably a whole topic that we could talk in another panel, another webinar. because there are different understandings of this, but if we put it simply, the third mission can, when we talk about third mission activities, we can include technology transfer, commercialization, outreach, community work, volunteering, and extension activities. So it's about that work with non-university actors, with other sectors of society, with local communities, with government. And that is also very important, or it is a way in which universities can contribute to achieve the goals by collaborating with these different types of actors who experience or might experience the damages that we're seeing in this sustainability crisis that we are currently in and we will continue with living. Universities can also support the SDGs by embodying the goals in their governance and operations, and they can also act as role models in their society to other societal actors. And finally, universities' potential for the SDGs is based on their unique position in society. Universities are still largely considered trustworthy actors and neutral spaces where different societal actors can convene and deliver it. So universities, through each of their missions, but also as whole institutions, have a unique potential to transform society and achieve the SDGs. However, as these two researchers, Wendy Steele and Lauren Vickers, who I really like their work on SDGs in universities, as they say, universities are not only enablers of change, but they are also targets of change, meaning that universities need to change, they need to transform to support those wider societal transformations described in the SDGs in that vision of the Agenda 2030. So universities, this potential that I was talking about, this potential to transform society is a potential, it is not a given. Potential because to this date, certain understandings of what a university is for or entrenched practices in these institutions can act contrary to the well-being of society and of the planet. And by that, I mean limited access to universities, disciplinary isolation, reductionist thinking, the way that we operate, the way that we, or the way that we educate people or people that we educate, all of those can act contrary to the well-being of society. So again, it is not a given, it is a potential. So in summary, to fulfill this potential as unique contributors to the SDGs and societal transformations, universities must transform themselves. And these changes, and this is as a PhD candidate, that is what I am researching. So the SDGs and these internal or these university transformations needed for universities to be enablers of wider societal transformations. But I am not here to talk about every detail of my research or to give you the magic recipe on how universities can engage with the SDGs. So I don't think there is enough time and there's no single way or one way in which we can do it. And also because universities are currently trying to figure out how to best integrate the SDGs. It is happening. So my interest today, and also through my research, is to learn from people working on this integration of the SDGs to transform universities and working on their day-to-day on this, and also to have critical and honest conversations about these efforts. For me as a researcher interested in changing universities, it is exciting to see there's a lot happening in universities around the world in relation to the SDGs. I can't say that all universities in the world are interested in the goals, but we are seeing more and more universities engaging with them. And there are a few ways in which we can see this rising interest. For example, through public commitments or pledges to the SDGs, they're becoming more common in different universities around the world. Universities are also joining higher education networks that work specifically on sharing best practices on how to integrate the goals in the higher education sector. Universities are also developing ways in which they can report against the SDGs, developing reporting mechanisms and processes and indicators in which they can translate the work that they do within universities into the SDGs or align their work to the SDGs. And among other examples, there's an increasing amount of universities that are participating in rankings that are based on the SDGs. For example, the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, where universities are ranked based on their contribution to the goals. So a lot is happening, and it is exciting. But as I said, I am not here to prescribe something or even to describe what other universities are doing in this space. That would be a great conversation again for another day. But I thought I would first, I would like to hear a bit from you and also talk about a framework that I think is useful when thinking critically about university transformations and the SDGs. So for that, I did not set up a poll or anything. I was just counting on people being a bit active on the chat. Quickly, in 1-2 minutes, I'm very curious about how you, the attendees to this webinar, are integrating or would like to integrate the SDGs at the University of Toronto, or your university if you're not based at the Uni of Toronto. And also the types of projects or initiatives or changes that you would introduce. So just to understand kind of like the range of initiatives and the types of ideas that come up when you think about SDGs in universities. So quickly, if maybe I'm happy with 2 to 3 people just saying something. If you could just write on the chat, not the Q&A, just the chat, some of the ideas that you think, well, how are you integrating the SDGs, or how would you like the SDGs to be integrated in your university, or the types of projects. So it's not very, I'm flexible with how you want to answer this question. It's just to have a little bit of an idea of this. Anyone? I have my chat open. So yes, teaching sustainability at the business school and using the SDGs as a categorization. Thank you. Reference to the SDGs in learning, connecting SDGs to initiatives wherever possible. Also embedding them in the procurement processes, connecting, I think I read that one already. A university student exchange based on students engaging in the SDGs projects. I think these are great. I think I read most of them. Thank you. Oh, there's one more, and then I'll go back to our presentation. So using the SDGs as a guide to develop programming and a food center, and we can order food. So thank you so much for all of this. And I'm happy if you continue writing some of these initiatives, just because I want to make a couple of points out of this. There are different ways in which we can think of integrating the SDGs in universities. The SDGs are quite a flexible framework that can give this, they can be interpreted in different ways, but it also allows for a lot of creativity in the way that we can think about them. And because of the university has these different missions and they all come together. So we think of them separately, which is not, normally we can think of them together, but ideally, sorry, we can think of them individually, but ideally we can think about them together. We think about education and the SDGs. What can we do in that space? Research and the SDGs, the third mission and the SDGs, and a lot more, maybe in campus operations and the SDGs. So there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of creativity, and there are different ways of doing it. And this is something that in my current research, I am trying to also understand. How are different people, different university actors within the university understanding or what do they prefer SDG integration to be? What do they think the role of the universities in society? What do they think universities should do in terms of transforming society for more just and sustainable futures? And also, how do they think that the SDG should be integrated to support that? So one of my first points of this conversation was that when we think about SDGs in universities, we might come or assume that we all know what that means. And we're not necessarily having the conversations about people valuing the SDGs differently or thinking about integration in different ways. And those are very important. So it's almost like a step back, talking about it and talking about and identifying the different ways that they prefer and how they value the SDGs. They are very useful, but without those honest conversations, strategies or changes in the university can get lost, or they can be, some of them can be undermined, or some of them might not be preferred because we think we all know what we're talking about. So it sounds pretty simple. And the other one, and I'll briefly go through it because I don't have a lot of time left, is I like thinking about change in universities in this way, using a particular framework that I've been using in my research. That can be useful also for you as a student, as a staff member, as a lecturer, as an academic. And this is the framework. So I like to think about depth of change. What type of change do we want when we're integrating the SDGs in universities, but also the types of change that we want. And I'll explain very briefly each of them, and then we can discuss this later during the panel and the questions. So when I talk about depth of change, I'm thinking about how do we really want the university to transform because of sustainability and because of the SDGs? So are we preferring maybe no change? Are we preferring an accommodative change, or our initiatives are more towards an accommodative change where we integrate the SDGs in isolated parts of the university where they do not communicate, where other agendas contradict SDG-driven efforts, even though we're saying that they support each other? Or are these initiatives more supporting a reformative change where there is significant change happening, where the SDGs help question and reformulate policies, programs, norms? Or are we using the SDGs, or do we want to use the SDGs for transformative change when the SDGs or the way that universities engage with the SDGs help deeply question long established paradigms? So question, what is the university for? And therefore also structures, policies, and programs. So this is pretty basic, and probably in terms of initiatives, we can think about where are we in the spectrum of change? And then quickly, the steering effects, it also helps us understand the types of change, or where are our initiatives falling into. And I also like to distinguish between discursive, institutional, relational, and research. And this is based on work on other people also interested in the SDGs as a framework and governing change. So are we using the SDGs more to support our image as SDG leaders? Are we using it more to say that we're committed to society? Or maybe we are using the SDGs to change curricula, to change strategic agendas, to change research agendas? Or are we using the SDGs, and I saw one example, to create more collaboration within the universities or with other universities or with other local actors or other actors of society? Or are we using, or how are we supporting all of these changes? Are we funding one-off programs, or are we funding more established change? So I'm gonna leave it there because I know that I've already gone past my time, but I think that this way of understanding or thinking about SDGs in universities it is celebrating change that's happening. It is celebrating efforts that are happening all around the university, but it also gives us a critical lens of saying, what type of change do we want? And how are all of these initiatives connecting to each other? Are we staying within the discursive level, or are we really supporting other types and other depths of change within the university? So again, I know that I kind of get into all of the examples for each of them, but I think it's very, it could be very useful to have this critical lens. Yeah, and I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks.
We're going to jump right in with saving questions to the end of the 4 presentations, but the chat is, of course, open for commentary anytime. But now over to you, Irina. What's happening at UTSC?
I can hardly wait to share it with you. I just need to, I can't share the screen.
And Andrea, are you still sharing? No.
The other participant, here we go. Let me
there we go. There we go.
So here we go. I couldn't imagine a better talk to go before mine than Andrea's. So thank you for your wisdom, John, in lining that up so perfectly. Andrea asked about, offered the different types of engagements in what people want done. And I am calling for the SDGs and the need for radical transformation of universities. This is work that I started in my former position. As some of you may know, I have been here, this is my 17th month coming back to U of T. Prior to that, I served as a special advisor to the president of my former institution, where I helped develop the sustainability strategy for the campus. In preparing that, we were invited by UNESCO to prepare a book chapter, and I'm just putting this up there in case anything I say today is of interest to you, but it's definitely I've taken those ideas, built them, and have applied them now to UT Scarborough. I would say that UT Scarborough is radically transforming our campus to improve the health of people and the planet by integrating the UN SDGs into the very DNA of the campus. And so Andrea also asked in what ways the institution, the resource, and we would say it's right into the very DNA of our campus. And to quote this wonderful quote from my former leader, we are unapologetically ambitious and appropriately impatient, because as the Agenda 2030 fast approaches, we are all aware that we have quite a distance to go to achieve the current UN SDGs. And yet we, in the next iteration, know that there's still a lot of more work to be done. Much of my approach to how to do a radical transformation and to change the very DNA of a campus is inspired by another president of an academic institution, Michael Crow. He's published 2 books, and if you're interested in that, I encourage you to look at his most recent one. And he talks about design aspirations to guide the radical transformation and 5 principles to approach it. The first is to leverage our place, the second to model the way, the third to capitalize on strengths, the fourth to empower action, and finally, 5th to catalyze social change. I'm just going to briefly go and give you highlights of what we are doing at this campus in each one of these 5 design aspirations. The first one is to leverage our place. Some of you may know the region of Scarborough is one that has a population that is often underrepresented and underserved. We have disproportionately high percentage of people that fall at low socioeconomic status. It's a highly educated population, but there are barriers that they can't overcome to access progression, prosperity, wealth. Many of them are newcomers. I learned this today, that the North Campus of UT Scarborough is an area that would hold the entire St. George campus. So we have a lot of space and we have a lot of opportunity because of the geography of where this campus is. One of the things that we're doing is having a very respectful relationship to the land upon which the campus is built. We are creating edible pathways of plants that people can eat. We have a whole diverse range of campus farmlands that include areas to promote biodiversity and conservation. We are building an Indigenous house. And with that, we're having Indigenous gardens and elders that are all part of that. The bottom line here is that we are leveraging our place, including the very foundation upon which the university is built, showing a respectful relationship to the land. The second one is model the way, and we consider ourselves a living laboratory that is a showcase for the external communities around us, and those are both local, regional, national, and global. This first iteration of a book that we just published, we went and did benchmarking, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And we need to understand, when you say who's doing what in SDGs, we ended up doing benchmarking of the entire campus, faculty, students, staff. What are you doing in the space of the SDGs? We had so many rich stories to tell. We ended up picking one for each of the 17 SDGs in our inaugural offering. But this is something that you will see everything from solving poverty by hiring workers to come and develop trades, by working in the passive heating spaces within the university, It's online. It will be online. If it's not there already, I encourage you to look at it. The other way to model the way is in our Inspiring Inclusive Excellence strategic plan. There is a phrase that Wisdom Tete, the principal, used about being the need to constructively disrupt the status quo. And there's a need to be able to have forum where we can have conversations about how we, I hope we're all included in this as being constructive disruptors, can have conversations about what some of those changes need to be done and how we can move them forward. The third one is capitalizing on our strengths. And we have developed, and again, this media story at U of T just came out today, talk about perfect timing. We've developed an organizational framework. It's called the Globalization, Transnationalism, and the Advancement of Resilient and Inclusive Societies and Ecosystems. For now, it's referred to as GTA Rise. And some of the things that we are doing with respect to GTA Rise, you'll hear in the talk that will come right after me by my wonderful colleague, Erica. She'll talk to you about the SDG Academy. Together, both through the work that Erica is leading, as well as what we're doing on this campus, we're discovering pathways to transition to a just and equitable society. And third, we just are launching a network of research institutes. There are 3 of them to start. One in the area of environment conservation and sustainability, one in the area of inclusive health and well-being, and the third in inclusive economies and sustainable livelihoods. Our inaugural directors are pictured here, and we're now going through a series of consultations with communities, both on our campus, but also the tri-campus, because this is a tri-campus, GTA Rise is a tri-campus organizational framework. Now, talking about empowering action, we really want to empower our current generation, but also future generations in this space. And so an idea that we're working on now is something called the Planetary Health Initiative. Some of you may be familiar with the Rockefeller Foundation report that came and it was published in Lancet, the medical journal. And it really talked about the need to protect the Earth ecosystem to sustain human civilization. And so that became the Planetary Health Initiative, and we're looking at creating some aspects of that to interface with GTA Rise, and in particular in the way that we teach. And we're looking at breaking the rules, breaking down boundaries, and creating interdepartmental, interdisciplinary, innovative academic programs with a focus on what we call use-inspired basic research. This is research with the purpose to solve a societal challenge. We also imagine that part of this can grow into an executive program for practitioners and moving outside of the university boundaries and bringing those outside in so that we can have mutual learning and benefit accordingly. Now, the reason I'm really excited about PHI, the PHI Institute, is that our goal will be to bring the best of scholarship to bear on the most pressing issues of the day, to help humanity to flourish by deciphering the links between global change, including global change in economies, as well as environment and human health and well-being, through research that catalyzes robust policymaking and achieves social equity and justice. And what we know now is that when we do our work, we have to center social justice and equity at the front end of the research that we do. And that is some work that we are now designing our research programs with that in mind. And finally, we want to create something greater than the sum of the parts, something that individual departments and divisions could not achieve by pursuing their own agendas independently. And then finally, catalyzing social change. And here, we have a whole suite of exciting initiatives that are underway. The first one is born as a progeny of the national dialogues that Wisdom Tete has led on anti-Black racism, and we recently had another one on ableism. Some of those national dialogues, we see that there's an opportunity to create a National Academy of Inclusive Leadership, and that's something that we plan to move forward this year. We already are designing a new center for inclusive excellence for innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership Here, we're really spanning both social and technological innovation and reconfiguring our campus accelerators to include incubators of ideas, accelerators to transform those ideas into actions and actual startup companies. We're working on a proposal for a center for the art of storytelling, because I think you really need to tell those stories if you want to influence and change minds. We have 3 innovation districts, including EARTH, which is Earth Environmental and Related Technologies Hub, HEART, which is Health and Resilience Together. And I didn't come up with a good acronym yet, but the Cultural Innovation District, which is the mind and soul for now. And finally, we have our eye to 5 years out from Agenda 2030, holding the first U of T Global Summit. And we're still in the early stages there. If anyone's interested in learning more about that, I'm just creating the project charter for that and would love to share it with you. And at the end of the day, we want to have measurable impact. And so we want to create discoverers in use-inspired research, entrepreneurs that move those discoveries into action, artists who can translate discoveries to inspire communities to act, capacity builders that empower communities to act, and ultimately world leaders with global impact. Thank you. I'll turn it back to John.
Many thanks, Irina. It is really exciting what's happening at UTSC. Lots of stuff. And I think it goes to show how much change can happen in a short period of time. We often think these problems are so intractable and huge that, you know, it'll take us forever to resolve them. But then you look at what can happen in a few short years in terms of institutional transformation. I think we're going to see more and more and more of this. I'm very optimistic about the prospects for rapid institutional change. Over to you, Erica.
Okay, so thank you so much. I mean, it's a real pleasure to be part of this panel, and I'm delighted to be presenting on the heels of Andrea and Irina, very inspirational talks, and look forward to talking about how we can transform ourselves as institutions, but also to continually subject ourselves to that critical interrogation of how we can do better. And I think that also comes from not just being insular and doing work within the university, but how we relate to other actors more broadly. So I think both of your talks have really inspired me to really emphasize that. So today, what I've been asked to do is to talk a little bit about the SDGs at U of T, Institutional Strategic Initiative, which is under development. And I've had the great pleasure and honor to co-lead this with Professor Marc Cadot, who is a professor at UTSC, and our senior leader, staff person, Dakota Foster, and many, many people, including Irina and John and others who've contributed to the development. So I did want to acknowledge that this is really the input or the product of many minds that have come together. So Andrea, I think you started to touch on this in terms of some of the, I think, barriers. And while we don't want to be limited by them, we did want to acknowledge what some of the challenges are that face large institutions like ours, and we're not unique in this space. And while there's great energy and interest in transforming our structures to really produce interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary work, as Irina's presentation has demonstrated, that is possible. We do operate within a very large and siloed university structure that can make those kinds of actions challenging. And many of the challenges that are listed here, we don't want to be limited by them, but we have to acknowledge them to be able to transform and to work around them. Some of the funding structures are quite siloed, and obviously there's always competition in an academic sector, which I think can promote great ideas, but can also fly in the face of collaboration and coordination. And so you need to incentivize that collaboration and cooperation, because many of the metrics that are used to measure success of academics are very individually oriented. And so we have to acknowledge that in order to incentivize the kind of work that the SDG agenda inspires us to do need to look at different ways of measuring impact. Research at the university on sustainability and sustainable development is quite scattered, but thanks to the leadership of John and others, I think we're starting to really get a better sense of our collective capacity and harness. So many of these challenges that are here that I don't want to belabor are things that we are hearing from our colleagues, but also I think shouldn't be a surprise. And some of them we've already started to change and move the needle on. For example, programs and courses, we have a better handle on how many of our courses are actually truly addressing sustainability. So, you know, while this initiative is one of many solutions to many of these challenges, I think some of the solutions we were hearing from our colleagues included that we really needed to start to systemically remove those barriers that hinder research on transitions to sustainability, to look at some of the funding cracks, because funding can also be siloed, but also can be very aligned to a discipline or to a faculty. So how do we transcend those cracks in the funding system and provide the kind of catalyst funding to create the kinds of ideas that then could be parlayed into larger grants on interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary projects. And, you know, Irina's initiative that she's just outlined, GTA Rise, why this initiative is so well aligned to it in part, there are many reasons, but it is a tri-campus endeavor. And so I think that's really important to leverage the talents that are on the 3 campuses at the University of Toronto, and also the different partnerships that come with that, and an opportunity to curate knowledge across the 17 SDGs. And finally, student engagement. And I think this is where the passion, the energy, this is their future, has come from. And so finding ways to really engage and harness the talents of students and to accompany them on this journey with us and engage them fully. This has been really critical to the development of this initiative as well. We actually had a separate student steering committee that really helped to contribute to this. So in a nutshell, I think what we're trying to work towards is to create ethical but deliberate spaces for critical interrogation of this agenda. So we don't take it for granted. To your point, Andrea, we're working within the framework. It provides a lot of wonderful opportunities for new questions to be asked. But the way in which we're imagining this initiative is that we, if we may be so bold, and I'm sure other universities have thought about this, is how might we inform the next iteration of SDGs? Because 2030 is coming very, very soon. And so we can work within the agenda, like we have to work within our institution, while we also start to look at what it needs to do better. And certainly this is very important when you look at how the SDGs were very much a response to many failures of the MDGs. And so I think there's an opportunity for our university, together with partners, to really expand the scope of that. So very briefly, the vision and mission for this proposed initiative is stated here. And so very much some of the same words you heard from my colleagues around transformation, transdisciplinary research, to empower actions on the SDGs, to build an equitable and sustainable future, so very aspirational. And very much the way we hope to do that is to further knowledge that is co-produced. So there's a lot of co-learning, co-production with many different actors that could be different researchers with each other across disciplines, policy actors, industry. We take a very expansive view, community, NGOs, and engagement of faculty and trainees to build strong, inclusive, and innovative partnerships. The 4 thematic areas for research that we've landed on, I won't read them all, but I think Irina's already talked about the first one, but the first one really is around transition pathways for sustainability. In coming up with these areas, no one researcher will perfectly align to any one of these, but together, along with teams, that's the goal. These themes had to really transcend multiple disciplinary ways of knowing and doing and producing knowledge. And so that was really very much a goal. So we're really taking a very expansive view to transition pathways, defined as semi-coherent patterns of major changes in the configuration of social technological systems. But these spaces are often the subject of political contestation. And so we really do want to start to think about this. And given where we're located, there's lots of opportunity to think about sustainable pathways for cities as one area. And we have a school of cities that's already engaging in that work. The second area is measuring progress. So as many of you know who've studied the SDGs intently, we have 17 goals, we have many targets, we have at least 169 indicators. Are we measuring the right things? Are we measuring them well? I would argue that we may still be in a space where we're measuring SDG goals too vertically. And what I mean by that is that we may need better indices, for example, in my field of well-being, that knit together different indicators to tell us the story about what does a healthy community look like or a healthier society look like. But you don't get that by measuring one indicator at a time. So we need to think very creatively about measurement across multiple domains and across space and time. I think there's a temporal dimension to that, and to do that well. Instruments and interventions, I think that speaks to policies, programs, thinking very, the ways in which we intervene on problems and how well that's doing and to what extent they have equity impacts. And then the fourth is really to acknowledge that, again, we don't want to silo research themes. And so there's lots of synergies. And Andrea, you spoke to this very nicely about the interconnectedness between the SDGs. And so there are questions that will intersect with transition pathways and progress measurement, for example. And so we do want a space for that. So very briefly, and I'm not going to read this because I'm sure the slides will be made available to anyone who's interested, but we've acknowledged a number of pillars to this initiative. They speak to the structures which respond back to the challenges that I outlined. I've spoken to this. So really, one of the very, I think, challenging things in a transdisciplinary initiative is to not let one way of knowing, epistemological or methodological way of answering a question to dominate. Very challenging to do. I see that even within, fields like public health, which is where I stem from. And so we really have to pay deliberate attention to challenge those mainstream approaches to knowledge production, to create the kind of evidence that really draws on that richness. That's what's going to be different about how we produce new knowledge that's co-produced. Diverse trainees, partnerships, this bidirectional knowledge exchange to really be true to co-production. That means the questions that get asked are not just asked by researchers alone in a room, but are really co-produced right throughout the research process. And then, of course, community partnerships that are based on reciprocity, inclusiveness, in the spirit of leave no one behind. And so very briefly, a couple of initiatives, and there are many more that I wanted to highlight that we're proposing under this initiative, and we're starting to flesh out the details of this. An SDG Scholar Academy that will really be a way to help recognize not only, but also catalyze new knowledge among scholars by mobilizing them in an open discussion and debate. I like to use the word think tank space to create that space for interrogation about some of those bigger ideas to advance knowledge and transdisciplinary understandings to really solve some of these big societal problems. And hopefully addressing issues that are critical to sustainable development. Happy to answer any questions in the Q&A period about this, but that's very briefly the Academy. And, some of the funding mechanisms that we're thinking about, I think they're not, unusual, but they're really going to be purposeful and intentional with those thematic areas in mind, and with the goal of dismantling some of the barriers and the silos. And one of the ones I wanted to draw attention to is this idea of synthesis grants, bringing different knowledges together about what is the state of knowledge that we have on a topic to really use that as a way to build a research agenda that then could catalyze many more projects together. And to do that, not just with people at the university, but with other partners, policy actors, international collaborators in different spaces. So I think it presents a great opportunity for collaboration with other institutions around the world. And knowledge mobilization, of course, is pivotal. We see ourselves helping to catalyze communities of practice and creating innovation hubs and roundtables, which is, I think, a little akin to some of the ideas that Irina presented that are happening in the Scarborough area, where you can bring roundtables of policy actors together to start to debate the evidence and what is needed for policy recommendations. So these things can take on really different forms. And I think innovation hubs, certainly, many people have different views of what that might look like. But, as I like to say, it's really important to have a culture where failure is actually important and is learned from systematically. And you have to take some major risks. And so to innovate, you need to create structures that allow you to fail, but maybe fail fast and learn and bounce back so that you can scale the things that really work rather than perpetuating incrementally things that ultimately might not work down the road. So I think we have to create structures that enable innovation and risk-taking and new ways of thinking about these very wicked societal problems. So, I thought I better add a quote myself. So, I mean, this is one of many that I like, and I think it's very true about a lot of things that we do, that we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them. And so it's one of many quotes that I'd like to go back to and think about. And so hopefully I've left you with some inspiration about this proposed initiative, and I'll turn it back to you, John. And thanks for listening, everyone. Look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Erica. Always great to hear about SDGs at U of T. So as Andrea, Irina, and Erica have all emphasized, universities need to step up and do much more, and to rethink their role and to be critical of traditional roles universities have played in society. What that means to me is we need to interpret that third mission that Andrea laid out in a much more expansive way than it has sometimes been interpreted. It's about societal transformation, and it's about our responsibility to do everything we can to contribute to that transformation. University brings a bunch of things to the table, and we need to mobilize those capabilities. So with that as context, I'd like to just say a few words about the activities being undertaken by or with the support of the Committee on the Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainability, CECCS, at U of T, which is a university-wide committee and initiative and set of activities. The mandate, I forgot to share my screen. Sorry about that. The mandate of CECCS is to advance coordination of the university's contributions and objectives pertaining to research and innovation, academic programs, and sustainability initiatives related to our operations, all in the context of engagement with the various communities with whom we work. So that was the mandate we were given back in 2017 when we were created. We have an organizational framework that has 2 principles, 4 themes, and 4 subcommittees. The overarching principles are an approach to sustainability that says it's not just about harm reduction and damage limitation, but it's actually about creating positive outcomes beyond net zero to net positive in terms of both human and environmental well-being and outcomes. So we're looking for ways to make things better, not just less bad. And secondly, and this is very hard for universities to do, a true integration of the operational side of the house and the academic side of the house, operational sustainability and academic sustainability. We try to do this in terms of 4 cross-cutting themes. The first you've heard a little bit about: campus as a living lab, treat the whole campus as a sandbox, as a test bed, but also living lab activities off campus, in neighborhoods, for example, in communities. Secondly, the university as an agent of change in the community and internally. The UN SDGs are one of the cross-cutting themes, as is student leadership. And the idea is pretty much everything we do should have some aspect of these 4 cross-cutting themes reflected in it. The activities of ECCS take place through 4 subcommittees, pretty familiar: teaching and learning, research, operations, and engagement and partnerships. The ultimate goal here is to make sustainability part of the core identity of U of T, running through all its activities in these 4 areas. So when people say the words University of Toronto, the idea of sustainability is kind of attached. So that's kind of the aspirational goal. To that end, we have about 20 different activities and projects within attached to the 4 subcommittees. I don't have time to walk you through all of those, but I'm going to give you a subset of activities in these 4 areas. Starting with teaching and learning, our first activity I want to mention is our searchable sustainability course inventory. This is actually crucial. What's going on out there already? Who's already teaching sustainability in the 10,000 undergraduate courses that U of T offers each year? So this is an inventory of all undergraduate courses produced on an annual basis using the SDG keywords to identify sustainability-oriented courses. In 21-22, we found 3,000 roughly sustainability-oriented courses, 30% of the more than 10,000 courses offered in that year at U of T. And you can see the database on the screen. You can search it by keyword, by SDG, and so on, and really find out what's going on. It's also a basis for finding out who's teaching, who are the faculty engaged in sustainability teaching on the campus. So a fairly critical resource. Our flagship program on teaching and learning is our Sustainability Pathways Framework. And this is an attempt to make sustainability available to all students at the university, not just the 4% of U of T students who are kind of majoring in sustainability and environmental issues, but the other 96%. So we sometimes call this the Reaching the Rest agenda. The goal is ultimately, we're not all the way there yet, ultimately all undergraduates will be able to become a sustainability citizen if they do certain sustainability-oriented co-curricular activities. That term sustainability citizen will go on their co-curricular record. They can become a sustainability scholar by doing a minor or certificate in sustainability. The word sustainability scholar will go on their transcript, and ultimately a sustainability leader if they do the other 2 tiers, plus some kind of capstone exercise. And the idea is this is not mandatory, this is voluntary. We want to offer this in a way that's attractive enough that everyone interested in adding some sustainability to their program will have the opportunity to do that. The Citizen program has just been launched. The Scholar program is now offered in 4 divisions of the university, representing 66% of all the undergraduates at U of T, and the Leader program is being designed. Moving on to research, one of the things we do again is inventories. We have 3 ongoing inventories, all graduate theses, both master's and PhD that have sustainability content. And as you can see, about 1/5 of all the theses just being produced through the normal operations of the university already have sustainability content in them. This is a really important source of information. That research, those dissertations are a powerful database of knowledge. Our sustainability graduate program inventory, almost 120 graduate programs have sustainability content across the university. And a sustainability research unit inventory, 133 sustainability-oriented units. Who knew how much of this was going on? Well, nobody did because there weren't the inventories. So the inventories are a first step. They're only a first step, but a fairly crucial first step to start to identify people and potentially make connections among them about possibilities for collaboration. All of these databases and inventories are coded by the SDGs. Moving on, we are very interested in developing workshops for junior faculty, early career faculty, postdocs, and PhD students on how to do transdisciplinary knowledge co-production, how to engage respectfully and reciprocally with non-academic partners in a kind of co-creation mode, all the co's, co-production, co-creation, co-implementation, co-design, all of the co's. How do we do that? We're normally trained in more extractive approaches to research where society is a source of data for us. How do we actually turn that around and co-develop the research itself, co-create it, co-interpret it, and so all of those things. That's a very different way of doing research. We think there's an appetite, especially perhaps in younger faculty and postdocs and PhD students, to learn more about how to do that. The third area I don't have a slide for, but you heard all about it. We want to work with Erica and company and the SDGs at U of T to incorporate, to help incorporate sustainability into research processes and opportunities. And you saw a fantastic illustration of how far the thinking has come within that group on that point. And then finally, Campus as Living Lab and community engaged learning. We have a database of all student projects we can find that are either about Campus as Living Lab, on campus projects working with operational staff, or community engaged learning projects out in the community. The database these student projects are all listed in the database. Most of them are downloadable. They're all searchable and coded by the SDGs. Right now, the database is 387 student projects, and it's growing. It was about 220 last year. So it's building quite rapidly as we discover more of what's already going on and as we add more activity. And the idea is future projects shouldn't reinvent the wheel, but should actually look at what's already been done and build on that. And this is a really powerful way to get students deeply engaged in sustainability, is Living Lab courses and projects. Moving on to operations, the University of Toronto has committed to becoming a climate positive campus before 2050. In other words, reduce more greenhouse gas emissions than the scope 1 and 2 emissions of the campus, which are about 90,000 tons today. So get to a point where we reduce all of those 90,000 tons partly through a series of absolute reductions and a small amount of locally managed renewable energy development. So that's the plan. A very detailed costing and technical analysis shows us how to get there. You can see on the screen probably a new project, $50 million project funded by the Canada Infrastructure Bank, is going to move that line sharply to the left from the yellow dot to the green dot. So speed up the process of emission reduction. Net zero is a common goal with many universities, not as many, I think, that are about being net positive in terms of emissions. Our air travel emissions mitigation initiative, ATEMI, is going to is developing a pilot where we're going to charge a carbon fee on flights to all senior academic staff. That's about 120 people at the university, in the dean's offices and the vice presidential offices and the president's office. When they're traveling on business, they'll pay a charge per kilometer and much more if it's business class. And the funds will be used for U of T owned emission reduction projects that would not otherwise happen. Some kinds of, for example, on-site renewables, composting, much more composting, active forest management, and so on. The Sustainability Office on the St. George campus runs a Sustainable Chains program. It's a certification program for labs, offices, events, residences, and courses. and you can get bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels of certification. Moving on to community engagement, of course, the Adams Sustainability Celebration, of which today's event is a part, is one way to reach out. It's an annual event series intended, as I said earlier, to deepen campus engagement, celebrate achievements, broaden knowledge, and get people involved. This is the third annual celebration, running from last October to the end of this coming March. Includes panel discussions, student-led events, showcase booths, and the awarding of student grants, faculty grants, staff grants, and a Sustainability Innovation Prize. Community engaged learning I've already mentioned, but we're developing an inventory of courses that put students out into the community on sustainability projects. We found 93 courses dedicated to that, 52 instructors, about 2,000 students a year is the capacity of the courses. We don't have the actual numbers there, but just the course capacity so far. In terms of international networks, we're deeply involved in two that are centrally focused on sustainability issues: the University Climate Change Coalition, 23 research-intensive North American universities, and the U7+ Alliance, which is a more global network, mostly Europe, and Asia and Africa universities. And then finally, our Urban Climate Action Project is really a project intended to bring the resources of the university to bear on helping the City of Toronto achieve its rather ambitious climate action goals, the strategy called Transformative. We've identified 5 buckets of activities, ways universities can engage with the world, obviously research, but transdisciplinary research. Engagement and convening, the university has an important convening role. Innovation and experimentation, we need lots and lots of experimentation to try out ideas in practice in the world. Evaluation, often something that there isn't budget or time for in many projects going on out in the world that as academics we can add to the mix, and capacity building. So that's a set of activities that we're trying to develop at CECCS. And so in conclusion, we're trying to adopt a pretty expansive approach to sustainability in all aspects of U of T's activities, linked to actively to the SDGs. Our goal is to embed these and related activities deeply into the institutional fabric of the university. And this chart is a chart that shows the senior staff in all the presidents and in the president's office and all the vice presidential offices. So each of these boxes is a person in one of those offices. The green boxes are members of CECCS, and the light green are members of our subcommittees who aren't part of CECCS. But I want to point your attention to the blue boxes. The blue boxes are senior staff in these offices that we are working actively with to embed sustainability into their activities so that it becomes part of what they do. A lot of what we do at CECCS, we want to initiate, we want to try out, we want to test, and then we want to embed and get it out there in the system, not being run by us, but by the normal operating procedures of university. In other words, let's make sustainability normalized in the activities of the university. Thanks very much. And I will stop sharing my screen. Okay,
John,
yes.
We are a little bit behind, so I'm going to suggest that we have a briefer open discussion for all speakers. Maybe just asking the one question that I'll put in the chat, and then let's move on to the Q&A if that works for you.
Well, I was actually going to suggest that we have collectively violated our charter, of speaking within our time constraints, so that we have to give up our, we used up our time, and we move straight to the questions and discussion, if that's agreeable with everybody else. Okay, in which case we are in exactly almost in time. So we have some questions. I think the chat, I haven't been monitoring it, but I know K-Bard you have, and you'll be giving us some questions from that. But we also got a few questions sent in advance of the event, and that offer was made. So I just want to quickly run through those, and then we'll open up to the questions that have come up during the discussion. So I have a list here, and I have some answers to some of them, and I'll direct the questions to others, Erica and Irina and Andrea, if that's okay, as appropriate. So the first one was, I noticed there are many lights that still use fluorescent bulbs. They're quite toxic to dispose of. Are there any plans to replace all lighting to LEDs in the near future? This is an important issue. Although we have already changed out many thousands of incandescent bulbs, there are many, or fluorescent bulbs, there are many opportunities that still remain to replace CFLs with LED equivalents or better, and they will all be replaced eventually through various retrofit campaigns. There is a program to make sure that CFLs are recycled safely, so they aren't just taken and thrown into the garbage. There is a process of dealing with them. At UTSC, for example, fluorescents are recycled by a special contractor, I'm told. On the St. George campus, there are currently lighting projects in planning for more than 20 buildings and plans to continue the LED expansion elsewhere. So this will get done. I can't give you a timeline, but it is going to happen. There will not be any more compact fluorescents, certainly not incandescents left at the end of this process. Either any of you want to comment further on that, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay, question 2, is U of T actively tracking research projects against the SDGs? If so, what's the mechanism? Well, I outlined to you the database that we are developing, and the St. George Sustainability Office and CECCS work to complete inventory of sustainability researchers, which I didn't mention, which will eventually be published in the STARS database. As we join the STARS Sustainability Tracking and Reporting System, our reports, our submissions to those become public documents. And so that information will be available, but it only includes details of the researchers themselves based on publications. There are issues of consent that have to be addressed in developing these databases. And then, as I said, there are the 3 that I mentioned earlier. Anything, Erica or Irina, you want to add about that question?
Just 2 quick things. With Discover Research being launched on campus, that will be another mechanism to get names of researchers engaged in sustainability and SDGs. And secondly, I'm not sure about the coordinated effort between UT St. George Sustainability Office and the campus ones, but I could inform you that our wonderful staff at UT Scarborough has done a detailed inventory of all faculty and students who are doing work in this space, and we'd be happy to be represented in that effort.
Yeah, and maybe I can just add to inform the SDG initiative. We also did a preliminary social network analysis to look at what were the clusters of activity when it came to faculty aligned with one or more SDGs. And it helped us to identify gap areas. Having said that, John, I already mentioned, I think there are huge challenges and biases in terms of what some of those citation indices pick up and don't pick up. And, the university also has a number of people who are affiliated to it, but aren't core faculty, but sit in other institutions. So we have to sort that out in terms of what counts, right? For what. So I think it's an interesting question, but we have some building blocks to work from.
Yeah, one of the things we found in the inventory of courses is there is a group of faculty who think they are teaching sustainability courses in the database. And there's a group of faculty in the database who don't consider themselves to be doing sustainability, but their courses are centrally related to one or more of the SDGs. So that's a really interesting group. And you know, you would have a somewhat different approach perhaps to those two groups. It's not a sharp divide, but it is a difference that is worth pointing out. There's a lot of faculty doing very relevant research who don't consider themselves as part of the sustainability community. And so how do we work actively with them to create a more of a sense of integration, perhaps? There's a question I don't even understand. How does the CB Montreal Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework align with the SDGs? So I don't know, Irina, if you're comfortable responding to that. That was
not only comfortable, but excited to respond.
Did
you know that the planet is experiencing the largest loss of life since the dinosaurs? So the person who asked the question, just to give context, the Global Biodiversity Framework is an outcome of the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, chaired by China, hosted by Canada. It was called the COP15, and it ended in December 2022 in Montreal. And the outcome of that was an agreement to guide action on nature through to 2030. So how does it align with the SDGs? It's the target of specific SDGs, both SDG 14 for life below water and 15 life on land. But I would argue it aligns with all of the SDGs. I mentioned planetary health before, which some consider, including myself, the operationalization of the SDGs. How do we achieve them through planetary health? And planetary health practitioners are focused on safeguarding both human health and the natural systems that underpin it. And therefore, the framework's four overarching goals and 23 targets specifically addressed to safeguard the natural systems upon which human civilization relies. And just a fun fact, we just submitted a paper. There's a journal called PLOS, P-L-O-S, and there are opinion pieces now being received on the GBF on this framework. I'm co-authoring one by my wonderful colleague, Steve Cook from Carleton University. And it talks about the exciting shift in this framework from where the focus has been to protect individual species, often charismatic species like the polar bear, to protecting entire ecosystems. And importantly, freshwater ecosystems for the first time has been included in these biodiversity conventions. Back to you, John.
Okay, thanks very much, Irina. Another question, in your experience in the field of sustainability, I'm going to throw this out to all three of you. How quickly do you feel Canada has been moving towards a more sustainable society in practice? You feel the progress is slow moving. What about comparison to other countries? That's where, Andrea, you might want to jump in. So why don't we start with you? Andrea, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I cannot speak about Canada. I don't think I can speak about Australia that much either, even though there's a question about another thing about Australia that if we have time, it would be great to answer. Maybe I can speak a little bit about Mexico, which is my home country. So how fast it's going. I think there are, the SDGs have been adopted in ways that they're very important programs that were created early in the adoption, 2016, 2017 in Mexico, that were very promising. And there were, particularly universities were involved in reviewing the legislative agenda from the upper chamber and the lower chamber in relation to the SDG. So there was a lot of promise in terms of that collaboration and using the academic sector to collaborate and identify these areas and issues. It all looks very good in paper, and there's I think there's a report from, I'll link it because I can't remember at the moment, explaining all of those things and how Mexico was one of the among the first countries trying to really incorporate it at a national level and very collaborative. I'm not sure it's being advanced in the way that it should be, because there's probably that disconnect between that commitment and that discursive power of the SDGs, and then whatever is happening, because we have this high level commitment, and at the same time, we have people in high positions of power that are anti-feminist, anti-environmentalist, and that disconnect, it just doesn't seem. So I wouldn't say that that has been accelerated, but it looks good on paper.
Maybe that's an appropriate lead in to that comment about Canada. Irina,
thanks,
anything
John.
you'd like to say?
I would. As I said in the quote, we need to be unapologetically ambitious and appropriately impatient. So I would say progress is in a good situation wouldn't have been fast enough. But I think with the pandemic, the global pandemic, with the geopolitical situation, with a declining economy, that is putting greater pressure, and therefore those SDG goals are becoming further and further away. And so we kind of have the double whammy of lack of progress, but also external drivers that are actually also slowing down our progress to achieving them.
Erica.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say just from a federal government perspective in Canada, after they were ratified in 2015, and Canada was one of 193 signatories, first time that high-income countries were also being held to account for the SDGs, which is an important reminder, I think, for all of us. It took a couple of years to get some, movement at the federal level. An Auditor General report pointed to, again, some of the things I talked about in the context of universities that were very siloed when it comes to ministries within the federal apparatus and many levels of government, not unique to Canada. Yet we need a more intersectoral approach. And so they created an SDG unit. And then, of course, the pandemic, as Irina's already outlined, is being seen, and I'm actually doing research looking at the uptake of the SDGs at the federal level, so the work is still in progress. But the quick summary is that some people feel it actually has more meaning now than ever, and that the pandemic has opened up this huge window of opportunity, and we need to get on with it because there's momentum, or there was at least. However, there's a capacity issue, capacity to lead using an intersectoral frame rather than reverting back to, I'm the health person, I'm the environment person, I'm the gender person, just to use 3 sectors, for example, and to really facilitate cross-disciplinary, cross-sectoral talk. Not everyone is equipped to do that. And then the other that I think has been introduced, depending on who you talk to, are competing frameworks for how you address societal problems. And the only one I'll mention, there are many, is the One Health framework. This is in the health space, partly because of the pandemic, right? And so I think it's not that we need another framework, but I think the SDGs are more expansive, inclusive of these frameworks. And so how do these things connect requires more conversation. And so I don't think we're there yet, as they say, in the car ride as a kid. Are we there yet?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, clearly we're not there yet. I wanted to just expand on what Erica said very briefly. I think one of the things that happened partly because of the pandemic, but partly because of a lot of other factors as well, is it's finally become apparent to more people something that has always been true, but has been neglected even in the sustainability field. And that is, if we don't foreground social justice and equity issues, if we don't engage with them at the very front end of the process as part of the core criteria, we're going to fail. We're just not going to achieve our sustainability goals until we do that. And I think that has become more apparent now to more people. And I think that's a good thing. Whether it speeds things up or slows things down, we could debate, but I think it's essential. And so it is a more intersectoral, it is the dynamic interdependence of the SDGs that is part of. So I think that's a good thing, but it's not happening fast enough, of course. Bart, I don't know if we don't have much time left, but maybe there's you can select from any questions that might have come up.
Yeah, let's maybe go to the one from Greg. He's wondering about SDG 8 and the degree of employment insecurity that happens at universities. So with casual labor and all of that, you can see his longer preamble in the chat. So I wonder if anyone has any comments about that, and then we can go to the closing remarks.
I'll just let anyone jump in because I'm trying to find it in the chat so I can see.
Can't see it.
The question.
Well, I think it's in the Q&A, but also in the chat. So it's going to be in both places. I would love to hear also as Greg, if Canada is a bit different than Australia, but Greg was describing a situation in Australia about, well, casual employment of RAs and TAs, and also a particular situation that happened in the last year and previously about wage theft. So the universities weren't paying the correct amount to casual employees, and then they realized it, or there was a bigger inquiry, and then it was all over the news. So kind of like that, if we're thinking about the transformative role of universities, and particularly SDG 8 in terms of decent employment, is it coherent? Are universities being applying the SDGs maybe a little bit more selectively and not necessarily analyzing their internal policies and just in general the higher education sector, thinking about the SDGs in the way that they employ people and that insecurity? So I agree with him. I haven't found any specific example where they interpret the SDG 8 in that way in their policies. And I would even add that I've been interviewing quite a few people within universities about how they interpret the SDGs. So that comes back to what I was mentioning before. People interpret them quite differently. And I was asking them also about access to education. Do you think that, and bringing in that social justice lens, do you think that the SDGs, one of the contributions of universities in terms of the SDGs is access to education and making it easier for people? And they don't think that's necessarily one of the main contributions of university. And that's very well disconcerting for me. So I think that would also apply to SDG 8. And in my particular experience, I've been a student representative of some PhD students within my own university. It also applies to PhD students and their living stipend and how much they're paid. And universities are not necessarily, even though they're saying that they're SDG leaders and they're very committed, they are not necessarily analyzing how much they're paying students in cities that are so expensive, such as Melbourne or Toronto. I don't know how it is in Canada, but they're not applying that commitment of the SDGs or interpreting it in the way that, and how much they pay PhD students, and also in terms of, well, what Greg was saying, casual employees. So no, unfortunately, I don't have an example, but if I do come up with one, I'll definitely share it with you, Greg.
We're running a little over here. Any last comments, Erica or Irina, on this question?
I just can share a couple of things that we're working on in this space. One is that at UT Scarborough, our goal is that 100% of the students will have an experiential learning opportunity with a living wage that would come with that. And these can be value added on top of degree programs or integrated as part of it. And secondly, some of my staff are a bit surprised at how much time I am spending writing proposals to build a workforce for a clean economy. There are many funding opportunities from federal and provincial governments to work with universities to upskill, reskill, and offer living wages as they become upskilled or reskilled that are in front of us. And right now we have in the order of $20 million pending of funding to support that transition. So Greg, I think at the heart of your question is a principle that we need to center justice, equity, even of our own faculty, student, staff at the university. And all I'm offering to you is that at least in the research realm, realm. We're looking at diverse mechanisms to be able to offer that both to people within and outside in the surrounding community to benefit from these opportunities.
Erica, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much to say on this because
you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I said I have a lot to say on this because I researched that particular SDG. So I'm really glad you raised it. But just very briefly, I think two things. One is this is a great example of what I think many of us were saying, which is universities can't just be promoters of the SDGs. They have to critically interrogate how they impact on them. And so this SDG is well, we could apply all of them, right? And, you know, I think where we've done better is to start looking at gender, for example, and the proportion and equal opportunity, et cetera. I fully agree with everything you've said, Greg. Happy to chat further about it. One thing I want, and not to take universities off the hook, but I think there's another piece of the pie that we should raise in the question, which is who funds students externally. Many of the funders have not revisited their amounts for PhD and postdoc stipends or awards. They are frankly, you know, below the poverty line as far as I'm concerned, especially when you have to live in a city like Toronto. And so I think that is really, really a huge issue from an equity perspective. And for those who may actually fall behind in their studies, because then they have to take on another job or two to make ends meet, to be able to actually live in the city and to be able to pursue higher learning at a huge cost. So there is a movement afoot. So I think this is where we can lend our voices to advocate for change, to tri-council funding in our country, because those amounts have not been touched in a number of years. So
great. Three great responses. I think we'll leave it at that. We've run a little over, but I did want to say thanks to all the panelists and our invited speaker, Andrea, for your time today, but also for all the great work that you're doing. Thanks as well to the CECCS Secretariat and the UTFC Sustainability Office for organizing this event. To all the thoughtful participants, thanks for sticking through the event as a whole, and to Wendy Adams for her donation that made this possible. And with that, I think I better bring things to a close. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye.